What is she?
She's your daughter, Logan. Alkali has your genetic code.
Not just mine.
Logan.
I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to hear about it anymore.
Logan.
Just stop.
I have to pee.
Do you expect me to talk?
Hello and welcome to episode 220 of Do You Expect Us to Talk? I'm Becca, and as always joined by my fellow co-hosts Chris and Dave. How are you both?
Good evening, folks.
Good. Excellent, thank you very much.
Or excellent.
Yeah. Hey, thankfully, like 9 films in, you're still coming back with fresh material, Chris. Brilliant.
Well, it feels like it's been a while since we've gone back to the.
Well, we were off for ages.
So...
We did Apocalypse, which was rather throwaway anyway, and then we went on to Bond. I know I'll always love James Bond, but I know I'm tiring of it because the social media is still full of like groups discussing No Time to Die and stuff, and I'm tiring of it. It's like I'm talked out on it. Thanks very much.
We've got Australia to come out as well. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, let's let it go for a little while. But yeah, so we're back to. Well, what are we back to tonight, Becca?
Yes, so after our quick diversion, whilst we cover No Time to Die, we continue on with our X-Men review series, which means tonight we are reviewing Logan, starring Hugh Jackman, Patrick Stewart, Daphne Keane, Eric LaSalle, Stephen Merchant, Boyd Holbrook, Richard E. Grant, and many others. Original music by Marco Beltrami, script by James Mangold, Scott Frank, Michael Green, directed by James Mangold, and released in 2017.
It's funny you just mentioned, because literally just before we hit record we were talking about Venom, because Chris saw it today, Let There Be Carnage. For those listening to this in 2 or 3 years' time and can't place when we did this episode, I don't mean the first Venom film, I mean the second one. And the score for that was done by Marco Beltrami, and it just seemed to be cribbing from loads of other superhero films, and I kept thinking, what am I hearing there? And at one point I thought, that sounds like something that would go in an X-Men film. And here we are 2 days later. 2 days later, he turns out he did Logan. Yeah. So we've gone through who's in it and everything else. Pretty impressive cast, I think that's fair to say. But there were rumours for years about an old man Logan film. Now, I've never read an X-Men comic, so I certainly haven't read that. I wouldn't be averse to, but like I think I've explained over the years, it's never drawn my attention particularly. But Old Man Logan, sort of Logan as an old man, and they've sort of done that here, but in the same way that perhaps they did Bruce Wayne in the Batman vs Superman film, as though it was The Dark Knight Returns, but it isn't, because if you read The Dark Knight Returns, he's 55, and if you go and see Ben Affleck, he's clearly like in his 40s, early to mid 40s.
55.
So they haven't quite gone there, and I sort of feel like they haven't quite gone there with Logan either. But it is that flavour of something. They kept saying they'd like to do it hard R-rated. And I always thought, yeah, right. What it reminds me of is we had this conversation during the Terminator series where McGee, for his entry, was saying, if it turns out R-rated, it turns out R-rated. And you think, nah, you just got a tit shot for the unrated version if you wanted, but you have designed this film to be PG-13 because of the nature of the property. And then, of course, Days of Future Past goes and does... what did it do? It did something like 750 million or something. I can't remember without looking. 783, 743, something like that. Which is big for an X-Men film. X-Men's always been a reliable performer, but it's never got into sort of Spider-Man territory. So I was always skeptical that they would do this. And I'm still to this day a bit surprised that they did. Having said that, I'm not surprised that it's now been knocked off left, right and centre by other films that want to show that the hero is fallible and die when perhaps you wouldn't expect them to die. So I was very surprised when this film was made. I'm pretty sure I saw it opening night. There was some buzz around it. I think by the time it came out, both Hugh Jackman and Patrick Stewart said, that's it. Last time round, they didn't decide until they were sort of getting towards the end of the film, and they said we couldn't leave it in a better place for our arcs on these films. So I would have been there probably opening night, but I must say, for all the sort of good I'm going to say about this film and all the bad I'm going to say about this film, I've never seen it since. I've never felt any reason until we were preparing for this show, even though I consider it a top tier X-Men film. It's never one I've wanted to go back to watch. So I've seen it once in 2017 and a second time about 4 days ago. What about you guys' first experience with it?
Wow. Yeah, no, it's one of those things, isn't it? I think it's because it's part of a series, and it's like with Bond, for example, you can watch them in isolation, but I kind of feel like, if you kind of have to watch one, then you have to kind of watch them all. But this is quite a long-running series. But yeah, no, I saw it sort of upon release with my lovely friend Mark. He probably won't listen, but hello. And yeah, it's one of those films, like, as I say, I may have seen it like once or twice in between, and then obviously watched it again for this one. I did have it on DVD, I think, when it came out, but then I had to sell it over the lockdown. Really nice edition, sold for quite a bit actually. I was quite surprised. Yeah, it's just one of those things. I think, as I say, I've not read it very much of any of the comics, maybe like a few kind of going through. But yeah, it's one of those concepts where obviously the character is kind of meant to be kind of obviously near like immortal, and to kind of see how it kind of affects such a character, I think is quite interesting, and one that's kind of also also treated, especially the way he looks after Charles as well, is treated very much with care and dignity, for example, even though the kind of the student teacher relationship is it's still there at the heart of it. I think for me, definitely, if we were to rank all the X-Men movies, this one I rank very highly. For me, it's not so much an X-Men movie, but it's more Western, taking all the Western genres. As we see a few clips from Shane, as we'll mention up as we get to that scene. I don't know if we'd include it or not when we do all the Westerns, but you never know. But yeah, I think to me it's kind of more Western, and also bits of like high melodrama as well as also being an X-Men movie. But for me, it's kind of more with the Western genre, which I think is where its strengths lie, really, to be honest. But no, I really enjoyed this film. It's visceral, very visceral. I watched it again, obviously, for this show, having probably not seen it for quite some time. And I was just reminding like how visceral it is, and I don't know if gory is the right word. It's kind of how sort of graphic it is, for example. But again, this is one of the X-Men movies to have the higher certification, but I think that's it's right for the it's not like overly gory, it's not overly violent, it doesn't kind of shove it, rip it in your head and spit down your neck sort of thing. It's not that at all. But it's handled in very very real, very visceral way. And again, it's it's perfect for the film, really. But yeah, that's my kind of first thoughts, really. I'd rank it really, really highly. I enjoyed it. It's really interesting to see this new twist on this character, and the relationships therein are handled really well. So yeah. Chris, sorry, I rambled on long enough. Your turn.
No, you ramble away.
Thanks for rambling. I'm rambling. Oh my god.
No, so I mean, I'm kind of in a similar position as Dave, really, in the fact that when I saw this, I thought, yeah, this is one of the better of the X-Men series, and then on the show release, but it was very decent. I thought the ending was a bit weak, which we'll get to, I'm sure. But apart from that, fully satisfying, and just never bothered to rewatch it. Never felt the need to. Never had the instinct to revisit, really. So it was kind of a bit weird going back to it. Sort of try and maybe kind of figure out why that is, to which I probably still don't know. So it's interesting going in, because I think after going off last week, after talking about Bond as a series and how we're kind of in a kind of reconstruction kind of phase with movies, it probably went back as far as like The Dark Knight and things like that.
Dark Knight Rises, I think we said, didn't we?
Yeah, I think probably even like, I think ever since Nolan took on Batman, it's probably started around there, but with a lesser great degree. But I think particularly Rises is more reconstruction-y in terms of like breaking taboos and doing your own thing. Well, it's not like it's not something that you would necessarily think that, but you think, oh, it's just Nolan being Nolan. But it has left its mark, and obviously Bond's kind of followed that trend. Logan's followed that trend. I think we've kind of seen it almost in Star Trek, almost with the J.J. Abrams film, and part, maybe you could say, part of the TV shows, and Star Wars even. It's probably been reconstructed to a degree.
Do you mean deconstructed?
So,
do you mean deconstruction?
Yeah, deconstructed. Yeah.
I knew what you meant, but I didn't want
reconstructed.
anyone listening to this and thinking, what, you mean they're rebuilding the world? I suppose they are in a certain regard, but yeah.
I mean, yeah, you I mean, yeah, you kind of like, you take it apart and then put it back up using the same pieces, but to do something better. But the problem is just using the same pieces, and it's just like, well, what was the point? you kind of just like changed everything, and it doesn't like kind of work as well. But anyway, so I think in regards to, bring it back to Logan, I kind of watched it with this kind of eye, and I'm thinking obviously with a bit of a kind of a little sneak peek of what's going to happen with the next Indiana Jones movie. Spoilers, I reckon it's going to be very much like this. Yeah, it's probably of the aging hero who probably has a daughter.
Yeah, but it's Mangold again. So actually, the only thing that might stop it is Mangold might look at it and go, well, I don't want to repeat myself. So that's the only thing. With any other filmmaker, I think, well, that's what we're doing to our heroes now.
I mean, but the only thing I would pause with that is, as like Becca said before, is about this is very much like taken, like sort of done as a Western, and they've very much heavily leaned forward in that. So I think Mangold might think, well, I made a Western with Logan. I'm doing something completely different with Indiana Jones, and not really considered that you're still following the same kind of things, like the aging iconic hero, probably has a daughter, goes on adventure, has a daughter, probably dies at the end. Spoiler, I'm sorry.
So I think there's a trend emerging here.
Well, it can't be a spoiler alert for conjecture.
No.
Well,
we saw the end of.
I could be completely wrong. I mean, because
we're going to call this out now. If this happens, Chris, you called it out. You're a genius.
We're only speculating at this point, but yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if it's like, oh, it's Indy turns out he's got a daughter, and he ends up like dying at the end. Probably sort of remaining in a temple that's collapsing, probably. So yeah, I'm now rambling. Jesus Christ. So yeah, my first thoughts. I'll go into first thoughts, and then I think it's very well done, very top tier Wolverine. But I found on this viewing, I just kind of watched it with a sense of, I'm not really that bothered. Like, nothing about the film is I have any particular objection against. So it's kind of odd because I do like it is about time like Wolverine had a decent amount of like violence and blood splatter, and all that's very nice. But I kind of find myself kind of I don't think this is as good as its reviews suggest. Not that it's particularly bad in any way. I just don't think there's that much substance to it, and I think maybe looking at it with like an eye a few years later on, I just feel like we've been here, done that, and I'm just kind of tired of the reconstruction kind of ideals, and I don't know. What do you guys think?
My gut feeling when I saw it was that I don't know that I'd seen any reviews, and I might be rewriting history here because maybe I'd seen some, but I can only go by what I think my memory is, if you like.
Yeah,
And I
I
don't
remember.
remember seeing very much. I think I may have avoided reviews. I'm not sure, but I got into it early, and I think with X-Men films we might have got it the week before the United States or something like that. But I remember coming out not having too many other opinions to play off, and I just remember thinking, and I think we may have talked about this now, we didn't review it in a summer review. There's an episode of Cinematronics with my name in the title where Chris sort of half interviewed me, and we went off into different topics, and I'm pretty sure on timing Logan is on that one, and that's what we thought of it like 4.5 years ago, if you like. And I remember thinking that film will be extremely well reviewed, but my gut feeling is it will be based more on its risk taking and the tone of it than the actual content. And I think what I mean by that is some of it I think is, I'm getting to a point, and this happened with No Time to Die when I think about it. You know, I'm reading forums from people much younger than myself who may be smarter than I am. I'm not having any sort of pop at their intellect by any stretch of the imagination. But they're starting with well, perhaps Bond could have survived and X, Y, and Z happened. Now, the obvious answer is you saw him. Sorry, I'm just wondering if anyone's listening to this who hasn't seen No Time to Die. But you see him immolated. But let's say that shot wasn't there. I've seen so many bloody thousands of films that you can tell structurally that film is retrofitted from his death. They started with he's dying and then built the plot backwards from that. And I felt a little bit like that about Logan. I just thought, well, it's old man Logan, he's fading, he's definitely going to die. He's got a literal offspring to carry on like his legacy, such as it would be. And he will give his life protecting others. It was obvious that Xavier had to die, and I have a problem with the film literally after he dies. It's the third act of the film and I felt like that about Bond as well. You know, the first hour to an hour and a half of the Bond film's great. The last hour's shite. It goes on forever, and who cares? And I thought, and when I got to and by the way, that doesn't contradict what I said. I liked No Time to Die on balance, but the second half of it falls off a cliff compared to the first half. Everything pre-London's amazing, but anyway. And then I thought, well, what's my disconnect with this? Is it because I'm literally seeing like the building blocks of a film just being assembled? I can see the committee talking about it almost, you know. And I think actually the other thing that sprung into my mind was the Star Wars films. And I specifically said about Rise of Skywalker that in a way that didn't happen with the prequels, it infected the original trilogy for me. That sometimes if a series runs long enough, something they do wrong even starts like infecting the better entries, and it's happened here. They've been so cavalier with their time spans, their continuity. I mean, we had Caliban in the last film. We had Caliban in the last film as a sort of young Richard O'Brien knockoff, and now we've got him years later as like a guy from Bristol. You know, and just it just looks really, really odd, and he's completely different. Caliban talked about himself in the third person and had a mystique to him. This one's just like a nice guy and a helper. And they've said it in 2029. Logan has never looked like this. I mean, obviously they've changed his hair. He's aging. He's fading. Professor Xavier has never had even a stitch of hair on his actual head in the Patrick Stewart telling of it, anyway. And now he's like wispy hair and an old man. And I just think it's because they've been so cavalier and then jumped around in time all the place. I don't care about this incarnation of the character, and the reason being, it's like caring about Marty McFly Jr. in Back to the Future 2. Why would you? He's only a possible future. This is only a possible telling. This is a what if, an Elseworlds. It's a possible end for Logan for me, because knowing this studio, if Hugh Jackman had said yes, I'll do more, they'd go back into the Days of Future Past timeline and still have him turning up. That's my fundamental problem with it. I don't know if Chris is going to say it this time, but I'm going to prime him to in case he forgets it. I don't go back and listen to podcasts, but I remember him saying in the third act, structurally and thematically, everybody is fighting the wrong person. So they don't even understand their
Yes.
own themes. So that makes me sound...
that's the thing that did bother
Yeah.
me majorly about the ending as well.
Yeah. And it's too long. It's too long for a possible haven, and I don't care. Let's be positive here. There's a great design to the film. I mean, I defy anyone to watch this film and not think of Mad Max Fury Road at least once, just with the colour scheme and the griminess of it and so on. The sort of adversaries are good, although they're slightly underused in certain cases. The action's good. It's nice to finally see Wolverine properly in berserker mode and blood and everything else. The representation of Xavier having sort of his demented episodes are quite affecting. There's so much to like about this film, but once it sort of lays the table, shows you where he is in life at this point, shows you where Xavier is at this point, shows you how they live, shows you what their dream is. He seems to think they're going to be all right on a boat for some reason. That doesn't make much sense, but okay. Once you set that table and that you get them going sort of on the run, by the time they get to somewhere like Oklahoma, the film's lost all interest to me. Because it's just like, I know where this is going. Xavier's dying, he's dying, she isn't. And the way they've pissed around with this timeline, it just feels like a what if anyway. And that's where I am with this film. And I feel a bit like when I talk about something like No Time to Die, I'm sounding more critical than I am. It's top tier X-Men, but I think the style of it and the rating of it and the bravery it takes to do that, because you're likely to shed some box office if you do it, has led to this film being held up as like a very superior thing. And as time's going by and more are sort of our heroes are being killed off in this revisionist way, this film is actually, even though it got there arguably amongst the first, it's slipping into a style of film now that's actually becoming cliche.
Maybe it set the trend for this downward trajectory. Can I just ask, have either of you seen the black and white noir version? I think it was released on Blu-ray.
No,
still.
that's another thing that makes me think of Mad Max, because Fury Road got the black and chrome release.
Yeah, that brought out the black and white edition as well, didn't it? And also the South Korean film Parasite.
Yes.
Which is amazing in black and white.
I don't understand this trend of releasing
It's
it in
amazing
black
generally,
and white.
whether it's in colour or black and white, but yeah.
It adds absolutely
levels
nothing. It adds absolutely nothing.
Like,
it's quite attractive in its way, but it's pointless.
It's very arty, but I think it looks very good. This is one of those films where, like a friend of mine suggested watching, I can't remember which one, probably the second one, but one of those psycho sequels as black and white. Obviously, the first one was mainly due for budgetary reasons, not because of the censors. I think that would be quite a cool exercise. Again, artistically, as a project, I think it's pretty cool. I think it does. I try to avoid the colour sort of cliche. It adds more kind of like light and shade, for example. You kind of see it in a different way. That was the last time I saw this film as the noir version, and I think it was pretty cool, like watching it through as like an old school Western kind of in that kind of lens. Again, it's kind of narratively a bit pointless, but I think it lends it a kind of on another level. I think it's improved upon a classic. But yeah, I really enjoyed it. Last time I watched it, it's a noir version. I really enjoyed it. I thought it was great.
It's done more for an aesthetic more than anything, though.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's the word I was hoping for. Thank you.
Like when they make when they do these things, I do think, what is the point? Like,
yeah,
I think with Mad Max, the thing I think of like particularly was like Mad Max one, which I think sort of like George Miller might have said that, I kind of always intended to make it in black and white, and I watch it and I think, how? Because there'll be certain things about the film which think, but you lose like you lose that in the colour, and I think in the way it's shot and made, I think, but you're supposed to see that colour, surely. Yeah, certainly with the film like Mad Max, for example, just because even the new one and the remake and everything as well. I think and especially with Parasite, for example, because you do have the contrast between. Oh god, this is really embarrassing. Between the rich and poor family, for example, and obviously you lose that when watching it in noir, in black and white. But again, I think in terms of like sort of like shade, for example, and textures as well, I found it to be a lot more sort of textured film for sure. I think it's, as you say, it's just heretics really. I mean, narratively it is pointless, but I think it's really cool. It is a bit of a trend, but only certain films, not everyone's doing it. Not every film there's a black and white version coming out. The only time where I thought yeah,
I
I
think, you know,
definitely see
I
the
would
point.
stand up for it. So yeah, I think it's a pretty cool effect. I know you guys think it's useless and a load of rubbish.
No, I don't think that's fair, Becca. I don't. I think it looks. I mean, I saw the Mad Max one, and I think it's slightly apples and
Chrome,
oranges.
that was it. Chrome, that's what it was called.
It's slightly apples and oranges, but if you force me at gunpoint, Fury Road's a better film than this.
Bananas.
But if I had to. But there are the obvious comparisons because there's slight similarities in aesthetic, and they both within the same sort of couple of year period anyway went for this black and chrome edition. And chrome's actually a good way to describe it because it's not black and white in the sort of traditional way. It's been
I think
graded
that's what it was called,
to have a
wasn't
sort
it?
of
It was chrome.
silvery quality to it. With the black and chrome one, I did see the Mad Max one, and my opinion's mixed. Really, I think it's utterly pointless, but it does look quite nice.
Ooh.
Yeah, it's alright. But yeah, it's unnecessary, and I think the sort of the absolute oppressive heat they're under in that film is kind of part of it, and I think you lose some of that.
You see them sweating,
The
like,
colour,
oof.
yeah.
It might also depend on how like your westerns. I mean, some people westerns like just like black and white, like the old movies, or sometimes you do need that. You need the colour, the sound, and the dust.
Well, exactly,
And the
you
sun.
do, exactly. I think that was the whole, you know, the main, very, well, in terms of like, the move to colour as well, I've sort of found that going back, so I tried to kind of watch more westerns as I've gone on, just like my granddad, for example. My late granddad was really into them. And going from like these sort of old black and white ones, especially, well, the Ranger, for example, those kind of typical cliffhanger adventurers, maybe like the 40s, 50s, for example, and going to see all, you know, really rich reds or like really lush greens, for example. And it was just, and I'll see those kind of classic films from the 40s and 50s that have been lovingly restored, or received like 4K restoration or what have you. I was lucky to see one of those in the Regal in Fordingbridge a couple of years ago now. Utterly, you know, really beautiful that you couldn't, obviously you sadly wouldn't have been able to capture in black and white, but to see all those rich colours.
Can you remember what it was?
I can't remember. I have to have a look because I'm really terrible with names. I do apologise.
No, it's all right. Don't worry about it. I've been to the Regal.
I think it might have
cinema.
been the Searchers.
The Searchers, yeah.
It might not have been the Searchers, but I think it might have been. But as I say, it was just, you know, it was a new version that had just come out.
Yeah, Fordingbridge is a really beautiful sort of old-fashioned cinema. It's really nice. I've actually been there. Obviously,
If you live in the south,
it's only about
do you get
12.
to visit
It's only
Thursday?
about 12 miles away from Becca, but I did go and visit it once. It's very nice, and it's worth it if you're anywhere near sort of Wiltshire. But yeah,
Or Hampshire.
yeah.
I'd say the only thing on the black and white thing I would add is I think the only time it really worked for me was the Frank Darabont The Mist. That film was meant to be in black and white, but because of like the kind of the way the monsters in that film are, they look kind of like cheesy and campy in colour. They look like really bad CGI and really bad effects. But I've seen it in black and white. I had like an old school 50s vibe to it. So when you see the monsters in black and white, it really works. It works so much better. So yeah, so if anyone's not seen, I'd recommend giving it a go in black and white. And the ending is fucking. The ending's great, but it's bloody dark. But yeah, give that one a whirl. But yeah, that's all I've got to say on the.
So I think it's fair to say from what we've said so far, Becca's the keenest of the three of us, and I think Chris and I are sounding down on the film, and we're not. I think it's the natural. This is more a Chris trait than me. If you praise a film to high heaven, the natural sort of balance in Chris kicks in, and he starts almost sort of saying, "Well, yeah, but it isn't that good." That's less of a trait with me.
Oh god, yeah, no, likewise. I'm not saying it's amazing and it's but it's in terms of the maturity of the script.
And a lot of my problems are almost intangibles in that I do have a fundamental problem with everything after they go to Dr. Benton's farmhouse. Although it produces one of the best scenes in the entire series, I think the decision to go there.
I'm glad I muted that. I just laughed like the hardest laugh at you, Dave. Oh my god.
Dr. Benton's farmhouse. Yeah.
I was like, please don't mention that. Please don't mention that. I thought, oh my god, he's such an idiot. He's mentioned it. Oh my god. ER reference.
Why am I an idiot for mentioning Dr. Benton's farmhouse? He's best known for Dr.
Oh my god.
He's Daryl for Soul Glow.
Oh my god.
He's Soul Glow, but you probably can't get it.
I was going to say, where's his Soul Glow?
You can't get it in these rural stores.
Yeah, that'd be fine.
You can't get it in the rural stores. That's what it is.
Not in the rural south, no.
But I got a problem with that last
went out of
film.
state for that one.
And then I think the same's true with
God.
a lot of these sort of films, whether the commonality is whether the commonality is the deconstruction, I don't know. But I wasn't a big fan of The Dark Knight Rises anyway, but I really didn't like the third act of it. I didn't like the third act of No Time to Die very much. I don't like it here very much. And I think, is it my old problem with action, or is it because I can see what you're trying to do and I suddenly start seeing the filmmaking? Instead of like focusing on the film, I can almost see them deciding, right, well, he's dead at the end, so what do we need to have in place for that to happen? You know, and it's I've even with No Time to Die, why did Nomi go and do so and it's discussion points, and it's because they're retrofitting it backwards from his death. That's why. It's actually very simple. It's not that difficult. You know, it's not a character decision. It's a plot decision, and there's loads of that in this film. But Hugh Jackman's never.
They could have done it like M. It's like, you know, gone for the whole film, and it's like, oh, I've been shot, and then just.
Yeah.
Oh, got shot a while back. Oh, and then collapsed.
I'll never not find that funny about Skyfall, that at the end he comes in and kills Silver, and it's yay, he saved them, and basically he's just saved her so she can have 3 or 4 minutes of more of agony. If he'd left it, Silver would have killed both of them and put them out of their misery.
Yeah, but then you wouldn't have had to say that last outstanding line.
Well, I'm less worried about losing that than the fact we could have lost, I feel, into some deep water. Right, thanks for that, James. Anyway, shall we discuss this film sequentially? Now, first thing I want to say, because I'm going to forget it, is the first thing that occurs to me is Children of Men. Because there's been no mutants born in like 25 years or something.
Yeah, it's like a random virus or some sort.
Now, if you've ever seen the Clive Owen film, you know, the guy with the really exciting voice.
Clive Owen.
Read the book.
Children of Men was a 2000.
The man who would be Bond.
The man who would be Bond if you wanted people in the casino falling asleep. And you know,
I must hijack Dave and say,
and he was perfect for Bond because he once wore a tux, right, in a film.
Do you know what the funny thing about that was?
What?
He never was in the running.
No,
ever.
He wasn't ever.
No.
So if it wasn't Daniel Craig, you would have had a very young Henry Cavill. So.
Yeah, I know. Or it would have been like fucking Sam Worthington or something. Anyway, I've just finished going through the Nobody Does It Better, the oral history of the Bond series, and at no point does Clive Warren get a mention at all.
Really?
Or Clive Owen. But yeah, no. I mean,
Edward Snowden.
I haven't read the book, but Children of Men it's a Cuarón film, isn't it? Is it Alfonso Cuarón?
Yeah.
Yes,
2006
film.
films.
Listeners, read the book. Cannot recommend it highly enough. The film is fantastic, but read the book. Sorry to talk over you, Dave, but you've done enough of it to me. So read the book, everybody.
No child has been born in something like 18 years, and then a child is born. So something has happened to cause sterility, and something similar seems to have happened here. In
the corn syrup. Spoiler alert.
And the what? In the corn syrup.
It's in the corn syrup. Spoiler alert.
Oh, right. So it'd just affect America then, wouldn't it? They're the only ones who eat that crap.
Well, no, because he explains it, Richard E. Grant. He pops up to explain the plot at the end, doesn't he? So, anyway, so that's one of my gripes about this film. I rate him as an actor. He's fantastic. But for me, he pops up as just a bit of a plot point, really. It's just like he pops up as the evil scientist who, creates all these genetically engineered children, and just basically explains that how he eradicated it all through corn syrup and things like that. And I just feel like, why? So yeah, that's one of my, obviously, I really enjoyed this film. I rate it quite highly, but yeah, like yourselves, I do kind of, I can't support his flaws, but for me, I kind of felt this was one of the weaker points in the film. So sorry to skip ahead, but.
So, Logan is basically It appears to be Nevada and around sort of Las Vegas and all the rest of it. And he's basically a driver, a chauffeur. He drives a limo. And he's not looking well. He's looking older. He's looking dishevelled. He's notably not got himself in the same shape for this film, but that is deliberate. And he's a chauffeur. It's the year 2029, and we start off pretty early with sort of some youths kind of attacking his car and so on. And I think the point here is we're going to see a lot more violence, but on top of that, we're already seeing that he heals, but nowhere near as quickly.
Yeah, it's kind of like just like the last film he was in.
Well, but that was because of a bug, wasn't
film.
it? That was because of a parasite, wasn't it?
Yeah, though isn't like the reason for his like aging or powers fading is that from the
implication is
well,
the implication is adamantium is poisoning him. The adamantium grafted to his claws is actually poisoning him.
Oh, okay.
And actually that sort of makes sense, because if it's 2029, wasn't he born in 1830 something? So that would make him 190, let's say. And no need to correct us, listeners, if we got the date wrong, because we know we're around there probably, 100 and something. But he actually only had the sort of adamantium grafted on 50 years before. So the majority of his life he hasn't had that anyway, and it is poisoning him. So, yeah, his body is failing him, so we get an open... The other thing is, I'm not quite sure what this is meant to follow on from, and continuity, I maybe should shut up about it. But if you remember X-Men Origins Wolverine, he was born under the name James Howlett, and then there's the silver bullet in 1979, or the adamantium bullet, or whatever it was, I can't remember now, I think it was a silver bullet. And his memory's gone, and he's got that coat with Logan on it, so he thinks he's Logan, and he carries on under that name. He's now driving around under his birth name, James Howlett. And I don't know if that's meant to follow on directly from Apocalypse, where clearly Jean gives him back something. But it's all a bit, I don't know at this moment, you know what I mean? Could this be an alternate where he never took the name Logan? I don't know. Or never had it as primary name, and he's carrying an adamantium bullet with him. So there's immediately something of death about this anyway. Where do we go from there? The nurse.
Yeah. So we see him. We basically see him go around in a limo, being like a limo driver. Obviously, it's his meal ticket, and he's at a funeral. Obviously on work, and he's approached by a woman who says he needs help, and she seems to know who he is. Like, first of all, and he's like not interested.
Well, she seems to know who he. I know. I don't know if it's from names, but the kid and her are reading X-Men comics, and they're X-Men comics as we would know them. And in this sort of world, and this is, I suppose, supposed to try to explain why we ever went with the Bryan Singer aesthetic in a sort of world that's now full of comic book films and comic book aesthetics. This version of the world, comic books are an exaggeration of reality. Think something like Unbreakable, I suppose. They have got like a slightly more, this is a more cartoonish version, the books, obviously. But if she's recognising... If she's recognising Wolverine from there, she wouldn't pick that guy. But there you go. She knows this is the Wolverine anyway, and she's protecting a young girl.
Yeah, and then I think the next day he's approached by a chap called Pierce. It was Boyd Holbrook.
Yeah,
is that his name? Now he's been in like he's in the Predators movie, the last Predator movie. Don't know what else. He's been previously in Narcos, I believe, and things like that. But
I've seen him in relatively little, although I have just noted he is in the next Indiana Jones film. He was in Gone Girl, Oh, well, let's look at the films I've seen. I've seen Milk, and he's in that. He was in A Walk Among the Tombstones, which was a really crap Liam Neeson film. He was in Gone Girl, which was terrific. The Predator, yeah, which was terrible. We're talking about the Shane Black one from 2018. And that's about it, actually. On TV, yes, he was in Narcos. And he's in the TV show The Fugitive. And he'll be in The Sandman, which is upcoming as well. So, I don't know too much about him. He's a very boilerplate villain for these types of roles. He's pretty good. He's all right.
And he's got like a robotic arm. And he knows who Logan Wolverine is. But he said, "Look, I just want to know about the woman. Like, tell me where she is. Tell me what you know. Or if you see her again, give us a call."
Yeah, and Logan has always had this, but this film plays up even more. He doesn't give a shit. What are you going to do, kill me? You know what I mean? He just doesn't care by this point. So he's not playing ball. But the woman is a nurse, and it turns out this girl is nothing to do with her beyond. She was working at Alkali Transigen, the company's called, and they're experimenting on kids, and it is to do with mutation. And it's not unlike what William Stryker was doing sort of 50 years before.
Yeah. Because it turns out like one of the doctors did work for William Stryker. Oh no, not the main doctor, but his father was.
Yeah. And so they're sort of staying in like an abandoned factory, I suppose it looks like.
Mm.
And you've got Caliban there, who can sort of tell when there are mutants around, and that's about all we get from him. He's an albino, a very severe type that the moment sunlight hits him, he starts burning. And they're taking care of Xavier, who's in like a big drum, if you like, that's almost a little bit reminiscent of the prototype of Cerebro, but it's got holes in it and stuff like that. It's supposed to keep him from getting his mind control and his problems out there. He keeps having seizures, and it's to do with a degenerative brain disease, and we're never told what it is. But it's a little bit like if you watch the end of Star Trek The Next Generation and into the new Picard series, he had one called Irremotic Syndrome. We don't have that, but it's just analogous to things we have. This is a mutant version of Alzheimer's or some kind of dementia, but when he has a seizure, because of his powers, that's dangerous for anyone around him. And there's references to something happened at Westchester, but we don't know what at this stage. When he does have an episode, there is a serum to sort of get him back under control.
So basically it turns out he is basically just he finds himself in a position where he's basically just looking after Professor X and is trying to fund a way for him to get away. Yeah,
he seems to think that keeping him calm and out on the sea, a distance from everyone, would render him safer and happier. So they're looking for that. They're arguing about medicine and everything else. Caliban, it's a bit of the home help, he's ironing and stuff like that. And Logan is just in a permanently bad mood. He looks permanently exhausted. He looks very tired. He's clearly aging, and he's clearly in a lot of pain.
He's losing his sight.
Yeah, I read that as the normal degeneration of age, but obviously that hasn't affected him until now. So in much the same way that 50, 55, 60-year-old human beings need to wear often glasses to read, he's now in that situation and almost not acknowledging it.
Yeah, so he goes... Yeah, because Professor X is kind of like... Obviously, because he's kind of still has some ability. Tells them, oh, you need to go and see the woman, you approach it. They need your help. And so he does so begrudgingly. He meets her at a motel, doesn't he?
Yeah, very, very sort of standard issue motel from these types of films. You know, the sort of thing you would see in Memento, any of these types of films. No Country for Old Men. They've appeared in any number of films. Whatever that conjures up in your mind is pretty much what it looks like. And it was just getting the girl across the border, because it turns out, and she's got it on a tablet, and we'll find that a bit later, but she's been filming herself inside Transgen, explaining what's going on. And she's offering $50,000 for Logan to get to a place called Eden, which is in North Dakota. And it's like a sanctuary where they all meet up and they'll go to Canada together. But these coordinates, and I'm going to jump forward a little bit ahead here, are based on something she's read in an X-Men book, which makes me wonder if there's anything in this, or it's almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy. They've all sort of read the comic, so they've headed there. I don't know if it's meant to be the same children, i.e. the children from the same plant, and they've just got them out at different times. Has she been there another time with a different kid and sent them off with somebody else? I don't know. He's no to start with, but eventually he does go back. Yeah,
because it's like she's going to pay him money.
Yeah, and he's like, well, it's work. You know, there's nothing altruistic at this stage about this Wolverine. It's purely self-interest and the interest of the people around him. Yeah.
So yeah, he agrees. All right, fine. I'll do it. And then he goes to the next day, and she's dead in the motel. So obviously, you know, the people from Transgen have found her, and
he assumes the girl's been taken. But when he gets back home, in inverted commas, Laura's in the sort of boot of the car, the trunk, and Xavier, obviously, much as with Caliban, can immediately read when he's around mutants. He knows what and who she is, really, even without having to be told. And he's like, but the girl's going to be found, and of course then comes Pierce, and it just comes into like another action sequence here. They try and sort of bluff that she's not there, and they send someone in to find her, and she comes out with his head. She's basically decapitated him, and it turns out she's got Wolverine's skill set, but it includes her feet as well. She's got adamantium on her toes as well.
Yes, she's got two come out of her hands, and then one comes out of her feet, which rarely got used, I found.
Yeah, it was used much more here than anywhere else in the film. But I mean, it's cool. It's a little. And what we'll find out, she's X-23, and X-24 is something else entirely, and it is to do with about playing on genetic material they had. Now, it wasn't Transgen, I don't think, but at the end of Apocalypse, they were sort of going in and taking genetic materials. So obviously they've got Wolverine's DNA, and they're experimenting with different things. Now, he was Weapon X. Whether they've counted on from there, and this girl is 13 later, or whether this is an entirely different program, I don't know. But she's X-23, and it effectively, as they drive off and Xavier's talking to them, it's his daughter, because she's been fathered with his genetic material anyway. Obviously, if it was literally, it's not literally a clone. What else? Pierce captures Caliban.
Yeah, thematically his daughter.
Yeah, and Pierce captures Caliban. Well, he's got something to die for now, hasn't he? Yeah. But it's no time to die yet, though.
No. Seeing as we're in a alternate future, which this kind of thing is possible when he's older. I wonder what's going to happen. So,
okay.
So basically, they're on after the action sequence. They're basically on the run, with
and at this point, he's still conflicted.
Old man.
Yeah, I would say at this point, he's not definitely taking her to North Dakota, is he? It's just let's get out of here.
No.
The one thing in the first half of the film which I like very much, the first half of the film I like very much, Which is a little bit of a lazy plot device, but I can't imagine how else to do it. To be honest, is they basically literally watch all the exposition on a tablet, don't they? And we get half of it just because they don't want to give us all at once, so they have the battery cut out. It's convenient, but again, that's just people getting old like us who've seen far too many films.
And then they rob a petrol station.
Becca, what do you make of it so far? Is this, when you think about liking this film, is it this that's drawn you to it, the whole thing? Is it the setup?
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. I think it's pretty cool that she's kind of got like a skill set and everything. I think the effects so far have been quite good. The relationship between Logan and Patrick Stewart have been been pretty good. Obviously, there's something quite terse, some tension between them. Stephen Merchant as Caliban. That's really random casting. And also Richard E. Grant, I thought was casted quite strangely in this film, but both are really, really good. But yeah, no, I quite enjoyed the scene up till now.
Okay, so on the run now. The first thing now, I'm going to go a little bit more sort of. Rather than trying to remember the exact beats of the plot, what's important from here? We started getting part of the story. There's an X-23. There's a hint of an X-24, and that the children were about to be killed. They were experimented on, and they just wanted weapons. They just wanted them as soldiers, really. But you can't force children to be, emotionless and killers. If they're not, they just weren't brutal enough, which is where the sort of X-24 comes from. Instead of having offspring, they're going to go for clones, and we don't realise that till later. The first thing I noticed, they then go to Oklahoma City. I think the only sort of guidance, as I can recall, and as far as I know, Oklahoma City has no gambling in it. Parts of Oklahoma do, because they're on sort of Indian or Native American land. Apologies. And but Oklahoma City doesn't, so I suppose that's just telling us time's moved on a little bit, because they've now got widespread gambling there. And this is where they work out that the coordinates to Eden are in this book. And I don't think he knows what to make of any of this. The X-Men stories, these are half made up. A quarter of this happened, and not the way it's happened here. But there's an attack on them there. They are followed, and I don't know what they're referred to, but Pierce's men, if you like. Logan is out and about in the casino and everywhere else, and suddenly everyone is fighting with this seizure. I don't know how best to describe it. It's like they're almost paralysed, and it's a fight to even move. And he's having to get his way back to the room, and it turns out that they've got guns on Xavier, and he's had a seizure in the stress of it. So Logan.
So this is like an odd action scene, really, because.
Well, it's a one-sided action scene. He's killing people who are basically frozen. But
it's very visual. It's very visual. Like very visually, it looks cool. And it's like, oh, that's a neat idea.
I like
but
this.
Yeah, it's kind of it's kind of like he's fighting his way to get to Charles, and at the moment the guns are just kind of there, just like, oh well.
That was it. He'd gone over to he'd gone off to get another vehicle. That's what it was, and he said, I'll pay you this much if there's no sort of paperwork and everything else. The other thing is worth pointing out is Shane keeps coming into this film, and Xavier is showing it to the daughter. I would suspect the average person watching this film hasn't seen Shane, which makes it a little bit less on the nose than it otherwise would have been. But had you gone into this film having watched Shane, that's telling you an awful lot about this film.
It's basically telegraphing what's going to happen, isn't it?
It's telegraphing where we're going. Shane is a good film. But it's very, very, very dated.
I've not seen it. I mean,
but you know the story.
I've started to read the book at school, but should probably watch it.
Yeah.
This is a bit where we have the where they meet up with the Soul Glow guy.
Shane was played by Alan Ladd, and his son was Alan Ladd Jr. That Alan Ladd, Blade Runner and Star Wars and all that. But anyway, sorry, what are you going to say? Sorry. Then they go. Yeah, the film's actually quite thin in some respects, because we're straight off to sort of towards the end of the film now, because we've got all of this, and of course they're back on the run now, on the road, and they sort of don't they encounter Soul Glow now?
Yes.
and like the film, I struggle with the film from now on, because we've got one scene that I love, but it doesn't negate the fact it shouldn't be here. They're on the run. They should not. At the moment they stop, they are more likely to be caught. And if they're stopped accepting the hospitality of others, they're putting them in danger. And it's there.
We've already seen.
Sorry, go on.
I was going because we've already seen the rest stop guy. Now they've already been in out and kind of robbed the place.
Yeah.
But we've already kind of seen like them trail him to there, and they killed him because they're covering the tracks.
Yeah.
So
they know they're being followed. You don't stop for a nice evening of like chat round a table. It's not a great idea.
Yeah.
Particularly if they're being followed.
They have Caliban.
They have Caliban as well, and they're torturing him with sunlight and everything else. Caliban really doesn't know that much, to be fair. But yeah, so they're sort of with Dr. Benton, his wife, and their children, and they just have a lovely meal. And I think this is supposed to give Xavier like a moment of clarity, a final happy moment in his life, of the insight to say to Logan, this is what it's about, family and love and everything else, and you've denied yourself all of that. It's also to give him a moment of pain, because he has a wonderful evening and then recalls what he did. He basically killed what was left of the X-Men in a seizure, which he couldn't have helped. But he's now like, I don't deserve it. And so it's all engineered around him dying, basically. They need to be caught, and they need to have this scene for it to happen. But as character decisions, it's quite poor, and I must admit, I don't really like the film very much after this.
So, yeah, I mean, it starts off right because Xavier says it's like encourages him to sort of help him, which Logan is like instantly, no, I'd rather not do.
We can't get involved.
I don't want to do it. They'll be fine. Someone come along. And he's like, no, someone's already has come along.
That's nice. That's a nicely written piece.
Yeah. It's like, yeah, no.
The screenplay was partially James Mangold. It was also Scott Frank, who I'm just looking at his stuff. Yeah, Marley and Me, The Wolverine, Get Shorty. That had a pretty sharp script, whether you like the film or not. He also wrote Out of Sight for Steven Soderbergh and Minority Report, so he's got some good stuff in his resume.
Yeah. I mean, thematically, it's basically established as the family dynamic of Wolverine, with his new thematic daughter and thematic father, Charles. Well, they're pretending to actually be that, but that is kind of like what it is. So it gives them like a family moment opposed with another family.
And there's a little bit of humour to be mined for it. It's a bit like what they were trying to do in the Phantom Menace around the table with Jar Jar Binks eating. She's got no table manners whatsoever.
But you are right. It does jar me thinking. So back when I'm thinking, yeah, but Logan's right. You shouldn't be here.
I mean, you could have helped them on the highway. You could have even helped them home, but like, get on your way immediately.
Now you've just given a death sentence.
Yeah, and I can see why it's there, but it's like I'm saying, it's retrofitting scenes to plot points you need. They need Xavier to catch up with them. They want Xavier to have a moment of clarity but a moment of happiness, and I just don't like it very much. And of course, the way the family are killed is quite brutal as well, and it just really hits home that they've just made a terrible mistake putting these people in this difficulty, and then they move on, sort of never really thinking about it again. Well, he does anyway.
There's a bit with the chap that he owes money as well to this guy, and so that they go and then turn up and get killed off by weapon 24, which I don't think was necessarily necessary, but
Yeah, but
Yeah,
I mean,
I don't know. I mean, I totally get what you mean.
but the problem we've
That
got now
it's
is this is. I'm not saying it is an Elseworld stroke What If Wolverine. That's not what I'm saying at all. This could be like definitively the timeline and everything else. But because of the time jump, because of the physical differences, because of everything, this almost feels like what if Wolverine was dying rather than Wolverine is actually dying. And so now we're just waiting for this scenario to play out. A suffering man who's coughing and falling asleep at the wheel to protect a girl who plays her role really well. Actually, I really like this young actress, but we only met her an hour or so ago, so how much we care about her, your mileage will vary. And we know now that this is an overblown act to lead Logan to his death, if you've ever seen a fucking film. And I've lost interest because the part of the dynamic was the four of them. Well, I say the three of them, and then a different three, because it was Caliban, Xavier, and Wolverine, and their sort of dynamic was broken up too quickly. Caliban sacrifices himself to sort of save them a bit, at some point with a bomb. But then you had the sort of three of them on the road, and Wolverine being quite disdainful to the girl, but Xavier being kind, and Wolverine not knowing whether to be kind or impatient with Xavier, sometimes being quite tender and sometimes being a little bit brusque. And that's all gone now, and you've got a possible version of Wolverine protecting a girl I couldn't give a fuck about. And it's introduced as well X-24, which is just basically CG Hugh Jackman, a younger clone of Wolverine. And none of this is bad, but I do feel like I'm supposed to be feeling more excitement than I am. But I'm sorry, like, even if you go in not knowing the plot, you must work out he's dying here, surely. I mean, he's not just going to take a magic serum at the end, is he? That's not thematically what the film's doing. They keep referencing Shane, which I think in pop culture, the hero dies at the end. But you may not. It depends. I can't speak for younger viewers and stuff like that. And we've now got an overly long act protecting children we've just met, a girl we haven't long met, and probably knowing our lead, who we don't know if it's quote-unquote the canon Wolverine, is going to die anyway. Which is why I say this film is liked more for its aesthetic and bravery in its rating, and a couple of brilliant scenes from Patrick Stewart, than it is for its inherent sort of storytelling quality.
Well, I mean, it's quite simplistic. It's quite a thing, but they've added all the dramatics and the character depth to it.
Yeah.
And they've gone with that. I think what you have ultimately is quite a simple film, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. You don't, I prefer things to be relatively simple. But
Well, yeah, we said like Apocalypse, Days of Future Past, they were both getting a bit messy, actually. So the style of the film, the look of the film, the performances in the film, the basic idea of where the film wants to go, I'm on board with all of it. It's just the fact that I think there's a bit of me that just knows where this is going, isn't particularly invested in this incarnation of the characters anyway, because we could have been back the following year in sort of quote-unquote present day with them both back as though nothing had happened. And yes, they didn't do that, and they'd have been silly to do that, but Fox has never shown any consistent care for the property, so I didn't feel as much from this as I wanted to. What do we want to say about this final act? Because I remember from the show we did 4.5 years ago, you talked about them fighting the wrong people. And I'd not thought about it, just to finish my point for a second, I'd not really thought about it. The moment you said it, I didn't even need to hear you make the point. The moment you said it, it popped into my head and I was like, yeah, he's right. But you'd probably explained it better than me.
We'll just get to it, but yeah. So in other words, basically, they go to like to meet up with the other kid mutants that have escaped, and he all gets kind of very sort of Mad Max free, and they reshave his beard, all like sort of looking up to the old X-Men comics. It's all kind of very much going to like this mythical Eden, which it is more like It's more like, as you said before, what's the term? Like a self-fulfilling prophecy. It's like it doesn't really exist. It's not an actual place.
It doesn't exist, but if enough people believe it does, it sort of does.
But it will be ultimately, ironically, where the story does end.
Yeah.
And they established that they've got like they've taken some of the serum, which is almost like which they give to.
It's a video game temporary level up, isn't it?
Yes. They're giving it to Weapon 24, which is like the clone of Wolverine. And they've got to vial this, so obviously at this point Wolverine is like very weak and very sort of worn out. He's like he's literally on death's door anyway. After like sustaining all the injuries.
And the start of the final act really, really, really plays that up when he's struggling to stay awake in the car, and the cough suddenly goes from like a minor inconvenience to like he's dying in minutes, surely. And even the serum is like let's give him his like impossible last stand, and we know it's going to fade off. So yeah.
And we have a similar. What struck me is that you had a similar kind of thing where, like, it kind of all of a sudden it's like a bit in X-Men Last Stand, where Wolverine's just running through the woods, just like sort of carving through people, just slashing his way, like. So yeah, it's basically they catch up with the kids, start capturing them. Though I'm a bit unsure because I thought the whole point was to kind of terminate them anyway. So why are they capturing them? Surely it's like shoot on sight.
Yeah.
Unless I missed that. Unless I missed something else I'm missing. But...
I'll admit I hadn't thought of that, so I don't know. I can't answer because it's not a point I've ever watched the film with it in my head.
Yeah.
So I don't know what they were doing actually. I didn't know. Originally, to be fair, that goes back a couple of hours because originally it was they were all on the run because the kids were now. They don't do what we thought they were going to do, so let's kill them. Yeah, you're right, actually. Yes, it should have been shoot on sight. You're absolutely right. Never thought about it, though.
But anyway, I mean, maybe they need to do it in a certain way, blah, blah, blah. Okay. So you have to fight. You got Richard E. Grant. He's like the scientist guy who's been experimenting on the children. You have, Pierce is essentially his lead henchman, who's been chasing after Gabrielle and Weapon 24. It's Laura. Laura is the actual name, though, isn't it?
I don't know if that's a real. I'm not even sure they got names. I think when the nurse had to say, "Here's this girl," and she hadn't told the backstory, I suspect she just made up a name. And because this girl didn't speak, she picked up like a very sort of anglicised name. So I suspect they never got names in the labs. They were just products. But it's a guess. Maybe she was always called Laura, but I don't think so.
So he's been chasing her, like, essentially. And you've got literally, like, the mirror image of Wolverine, like, fighting his younger self. Which you could say is probably the whole point of the film. Now, what happens at the end is Wolverine starts to like fading out with his powers, and he.
Yeah, we don't need Marty McFly before his parents kissed. We don't mean
no.
It's
basically the serum's wearing off, starting to wear off, and Richard E. Grant's like in the middle of giving his his bad guy vision. I have a vision speech, and just shoots him in the head. Yeah. Which is not expected. And during the fight that Weapon 24 is released, basically kicks Wolverine's ass. Like, he barely gets a look in. The children all sort of team up and use their powers to absorb Pierce into the ground, and Laura gets the bullet, the gun with the bullet that was meant to be Wolverine, and shoots Weapon 24 in the head with it. Now, like thematically, it's almost like completely arse backwards. You would have thought the children would have got their comeuppance over Richard E. Grant's character, because they're the ones he's been experimented on and basically sort of tortured. So it's like, it's natural, like, that's their kill. That's their, like, kill. Wolverine is literally fighting himself, so in order to overcome this, he needs to defeat himself. This doesn't happen.
He needs to have one last stand where he reaches back to find his peak abilities one last time.
And admittedly, the last one, which is probably the least important one, to be fair, you can have some leniency with it, but would make sense would be to give Laura the kill of Pierce, because he's one who's necessarily chasing it.
Yes,
but that one's less important.
It is less important because he's been a fucking massive irritant to Logan from the start as well. Yeah. But the one that I was strongest on, Laura should have killed Richard E. Grant's character. That is absolutely the one that, like...
Well, I mean, I was thinking about the kids overall. It should have been them. But yeah, I mean, that's still better.
Yeah.
But, I mean, when they had, like, the kids all, like, teaming up on Pierce and having him, like, using all their powers on him.
That would sort of be, even if you swap that with Richard E. Grant, that would make slightly
That's what I mean. That's
sense.
Like... That makes a lot more sense. It's like, well...
Because he's the architect of all their pain. The author of all your pain.
Yes, the Christoph Waltz.
Yeah.
So, that was my main irritant when I came out. It's just like, it didn't fit right with me. And I was trying to, like, understand, like, okay, well, maybe it's something I'm getting. Maybe that's like, maybe it's like a way of to sort of, to mess with expectations. Like, it's like, oh, well, I've got her something different, but I don't know, maybe there's something else that it does work, depending on how they want to. But I don't know, it just seems like such an odd thing to do.
But maybe this will sound inadvertently a little bit arrogant on our part, if you were to agree with me, of course, because we're basically saying we know better than the filmmakers. But doesn't it sometimes happen with decisions like this? You think they don't understand their own film. Do you know what I mean? It's like just in that detail, you think thematically you've actually almost forgotten where you were going with this.
I think, unless they were here and explain other depths in it, then
that does accept there probably
haven't picked
is
up.
An explanation, of course.
The only other thing I can think of is they probably thought about it and thought, well, that's a bit obvious. Let's mix it up.
Yeah.
And it's like, and with that, it's like, well, okay, you've mixed it up. You've done something that wasn't expected, but then it's expected for a reason. So, I mean, to divert expectations.
Yeah, but how far do you go down the path of let's do it? Well, diverting expectations is not... I mean, if that's the case, why not just get the bad guys to get salmonella poisoning or something? It's like... But
the thing is, it's the same with any twist. It's like, it takes you by surprise. But when you stop and think about it, you kind of go, oh, yeah. Do you know what I mean? It's like the film has still done the work to justify it. So that's what I mean. Unless there's something that I've missed...
And we accept there might be, by the way.
Yeah.
But
I don't know. It just seems like, well, that's you've just done it for the hell of it, or you've kind of I don't know, unless you've, I don't know. I mean, you've not really thought that much through. I don't know.
Oh well, doesn't matter. But again, I just think I'm in danger of making myself sound more negative than I feel about the film, but also feeling like a bit superior to it, and that's not fair. That's not really what I'm looking to say. I think it was quite a ballsy move. I mean, it ended up grossing very well. It grossed something like 600 and something million. That was only down a bit. I mean, it was down a lot in some respects, but I mean, the film was cheaper. So in some respects, they really did do well out of this, but it could have gone a different way. It could have taken a third of what they expected. It could have turned people off the property generally. They go to do the next film, and casual audiences like, now that last X-Men film was really violent. So I get it, but I just think that, like, the idea, the aesthetics, the look, the action, and some of the little beats here and there actually are better than the end product, because I don't really like the second half of the film very much. But it's still top tier product. It is relatively simple in that we've just come off 2 X-Men films in a row that were really quite convoluted, more than they needed to be. And this is a straightforward, guy trying to do one last thing before his body finally gives up on him. But it's got quite a depressive air to it, in that, like, you know where this is going, really. Anyone who halfway through this film thinks he's going to get out of this is like, really? How? I think I would say that about all of these films, that these films that are trying to say something thematically about passing on part of yourself, but actually having an end to your story, they're predictable as fuck. And I don't know if the filmmakers know this. I don't know if the filmmakers know this. I have had people say at the end of No Time to Die that they thought, well, I thought when they introduced the daughter, that he'd have a life. And it's like, I don't know if I've read that as an exact quote, but I've read, I was hoping he'd get away to have some life. And it's like, but that's why they introduced the daughter. That's telling you he's going to die.
It's like the tired old trope of, like, sort of, just one day away from retirement.
I don't know at this point whether I am it's confirmation bias, because that's what happened.
It reminded me, because I rewatched On a Majesty's Secret Service, because
it's fucking brilliant.
Nick, my partner. Well, we both watched. We watched No Time to Die.
Yeah. And
I kind of mentioned, like, it kind of leans kind of heavily on the Majesty's Secret Service. She's like, I wouldn't mind to watch that. So watched that, and she one thing she picked out was like, it's the same music. Yeah. I was like, yes, it is.
That's exactly the problem. But if you've never seen those films, I did say that last week. That if you've not seen, if you associate that music with No Time to Die and you don't know any different, you just think that film's got a wonderful score.
But the thing that made me laugh is right at the very end, where Trace, where, like, they stop the car, and Tracy's sort of like, you've given me what something I've never had, a future, and she's just leaning to me, well, she's dead then, is she? It's like, yes,
that's true. But that's to be fair, what the film doesn't do is then give you an hour to think about it, and you don't know they're actually going to get married till 3 or 4 minutes from the end. It's to be honest, if you're going to handle something where it's quite obvious, to do it quickly. But I don't know at this point whether it's confirmation bias, because I've just seen it in a Bond film. I thought at the end of that someone's been watching Logan. I think we might get it with Indiana Jones, and we were only one small decision away from getting it possibly at the end of The Dark Knight Rises, until I think they pussied out on that decision. And I'm looking at it now and I'm thinking, is it that confirmation bias? Have I just seen too many films? Or is this particular trope in cinema just painfully fucking predictable and actually damaging once you know that trope? Because this film threw up no surprises in the end. But wonderful end to Patrick Stewart's run in the role. His last scene where he doesn't realise he's talking to X-24 is very, very moving. I just think there's a real tenderness between him and Hugh, particularly when Hugh has to carry him and things like that. There's a sense of making it up as he's going along. His life's a mess. He's living in a shit old foundry. It's not, it's not like it's a bit cheap, but it'll do. It is like this guy just has never had to really deal with, coming to the end and the way things are. So there's much to love about this film. But yeah, once they pull over for Dr. Benton, I don't like the film very much after that, despite individual scenes working very well. What about you, Chris?
Yeah, I sounds like I've been very negative to it. Like,
yeah, I feel like that. What was the other film we did that on? I've done it on films before where I finished. Back to the Future 2 was one I really like Back to the Future 2. I think it's really inventive and good fun, bit overstuffed, but really, really good. And if you go back and listen to us talk about it, we are tearing it a new fucking arsehole. And it seems so harsh.
It's the reason why is because there's one thing to watch a movie and another thing to like talk about it. Because I think the thing that kind of like is we can pick faults, and I find those things a lot more interesting. And there's no real necessarily malice to it, because there's plenty of films that do stupid shit and get things, you know, and do things like wrong as we see it. But that's it. It's just like, you know, that's why we do what we do. We like to talk about these things and hash them out. And it doesn't mean like, you know, I mean, we've probably like, you know, it's like No Time to Die. It's like, you know, we talked about the faults probably more than the praises, but I'll still happily put it on and watch it. You know, absolutely. I mean,
but I think it does naturally limit my praise of these films, because people saw. I mean, I'm not saying people didn't genuinely love it for very good reasons, by the way, but I think people saw this darker, grittier. Darker's the wrong word. I hate that word, but certainly grittier tone and a bit more violence in it, and the sense of finality to it, and a masterclass from Patrick Stewart, and some real moments of tenderness, and a pretty good young actress. And that sort of all adds up to best X-Men film, bit of a masterpiece. And actually, I think once you dig into it, I don't think it's anywhere near, to be honest. And if you were talking superhero, I mean, it's only loosely a superhero film, isn't it? But if you stuck it in the superhero genre, I doubt it would be in my top 5. You know, it's not a Dark Knight, it's not a Superman the movie, it's not a Captain America the Winter Soldier. You know, there's a handful of films that, yes, it's a little bit apples and oranges, but if you compare what they did to what they were trying to do, I think there are films that got it more right than this. I think it telegraphed what was going to happen a little bit too much, and much like with No Time to Die, that final act is so fucking long. But there you go. It is still, for all of that, a top tier film. I think I would put it behind First Class. I think I'd be tempted to put it behind X2, but not much else in this series comes close to it. And if it's elevated by anything, it's like everyone in this film's brilliant. I mean, the closest to not being brilliant is Pierce, because he is a bit too cliched henchman, but everyone else is great.
Yeah.
For those of you, by the way, we've just done our final thoughts. We're waiting for Becca to do hers, and by the magic of editing, she'll be here in a minute. We'll openly say up front, she's had all sorts of connection issues tonight with Skype, but she's been writing to us all the way through and said, please carry on, because she feels like she said almost everything she wanted to say about the film at the start, and she did comment on one or two of the scenes early on, and then she said, please just carry on and finish. I'll try and come in to give like fun facts and everything else at the end. So we're that's it for a minute, but any moment now. Okay, so
I think it's something to say. It'll be fine.
We're now back after, this is now weeks after like most of the recording, but we don't.
It's been like a good couple of months. I'm really sorry. It's just because I've been doing random shifts, and
But we didn't want to throw away what we have. So most of Logan was edited about 7 or 8 weeks ago. But Becca had technical problems on the evening, and she just said, look, I don't really want to re-record it, so that's why she's been missing for so much of this, but she is here now to give us her final thoughts on Logan.
Yes, thank you very much. Yes, the pesky technical issues always getting in the way. Logan, I really enjoyed it. For me, it's one of the high points of the series. I think for me, in terms of the Wolverine trilogy, it's probably the best of the three, even though I enjoyed the Japanese one very much. But for me, it's not really a superhero movie. It's more of a Western movie. There are lots of strains of the Western genre running through this film. Great characters, great visuals, great effects. Of course, it's one of the more bloodier and violent films of the series. It certainly earned its R rating in the States. I thoroughly enjoyed this one, and would rate it very highly. If we were to rate the whole series as a whole, I would rate it very highly indeed. Great characterization. Hugh Jackman is Wolverine. If they ever come to remake this film in 10 years' time, I don't quite know how they're going to do it. They'd have he cast a very long shadow. He got some very big boots to fill, getting all those cliches in. But yeah, he is Wolverine, and he caps off the end to his, to Wolverine's story, in the only way that he can. And it kind of, leaves it pretty much dead and final. But no, it ends on a high almost. But I would say that, yeah, for me, this is, certainly one of the strongest films overall, not only in the X-Men franchise, but also in the Logan Wolverine series. So yeah, rate it very highly indeed.
It is actually the last time we're going to see Logan in this series. Obviously, we've got a couple films left, and as far as I understand, there's no like cameo in New Mutants or anything. Just thinking of where they go next.
Yeah, I totally forgot about New Mutants.
No,
yeah, I don't think he appears in it.
I'm not an X-Men expert in terms of the comic books, but I'm aware Wolverine tends to be smaller and very scrappy, in the comic books, 5 foot something. And the name I can't get out of my head for the next time they do Wolverine is Taron Egerton.
Oh, okay, yeah, that could be a thought.
Readers of the comic book might tell me I'm completely wrong, but that's sort of the direction I keep thinking of.
Is that the Kingsman chap?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I was just trying to.
Kingsman.
Yeah,
I was watching him in Rocket Man again last week because my wife hadn't seen it. And it just kept crossing my mind then, and she hadn't seen Kingsman either, so we watched both Kingsman films last week as well. So
Oh, really?
I saw like 3 Taron Egerton films in about maybe 10 days.
You had a Taron fest.
Yeah, because obviously The King's Man is out later this month. I think it's out on Boxing Day in the UK. So, and I will be
You need to
reviewing
see
it.
the Eddie the Eagle movie as well to
I've
get
seen
the
that.
experience.
And funnily enough, his trainer in it is Hugh Jackman.
Yeah, also yeah, he's in it as well. So yeah, you kind of got the connection there. So like, should he did end up taking on the reins as Wolverine, then here we go.
So basically, what you say, the next Wolverine should be Eddie the Eagle.
Yeah.
Eddie the Eagle, that's it.
Oh dear. Anyone not in this country, just look up Eddie the Eagle Edwards, right? Britain does not. In recent years, it's been a bit different. But if you go back to like the Calgary Winter Olympics, 1988, once sort of Torvill and Dean retired, who were ice dancers, we didn't do anything in those. The best we'd get is we had someone who'd finish like 8th in the downhill skiing or something, and that'd be about it. And Eddie Edwards went to take part in the ski jump. But, like, for example, if the winners were getting, like, 110 metres, he was getting, like, 65. He was just legendarily
He wasn't very
a bit
good.
crap.
But he became famous for it.
And he became, like,
He's
a
like
real
the very
cop hero.
definition of underdog.
Yeah. And Taron Egerton played him in a film. He's one of these people who can play smooth or scrappy, and he can do most things fairly well.
He's a very versatile actor, isn't he? I think because
Yeah.
I kind of thought, in Kingsman, he was maybe too young for that kind of role, but he pulled it off with style and panache, and was right up there with with the likes of Ray Fiennes, in this new one that's coming out, or even opposite the lovely Colin. So yeah, he can hold his own definitely.
Yeah. So that's just a suggestion. Anyway, I was clueless on the night about this film, Chris. I don't know what 8 weeks has done to our knowledge.
What film are we talking about again? I can't remember.
It's been so long.
Logan's
Oh my
Run.
gosh.
Logan's Run.
Yes.
So, fun fact,
I
Jenny
wonder if we
Agutter
could do
is
like
naked in Walkabout and An American Werewolf in London.
Yes, he has bum.
Yeah.
I wonder if we could do a thread of like 70s, 80s sci-fi connected into some of the films that we've
They
already
might be
done.
able to, because you think it's like Silent Running and, Captain
I'm sure
Bond.
there's a thread that we could do somewhere along the line.
I'm talking to
Yeah.
Kingsman. I
But I always
suspect we'll
thought
do
Hugh
Kingsman.
Jackman was
one day.
great as Basil in Austin Powers. I always
Yes.
thought
That's exposition.
So, are you in any position to enlighten us, Becca?
I do have some random facts. They are quite fun facts, but I think they might have been the same ones that I had 8 weeks ago. Number one fun fact. It opened in cinemas in the US. Logan was the widest release of any R-rated film, opening at just over 4,000 cinemas. Obviously, this was surpassed by It, when that was released in 2017, which opened to 4,103 cinemas in the US. Fun fact number 2, Daphne Keane was 11 years old at the time of making this film, so wasn't allowed into any of the casinos, regardless of any filming permits they might have had. And obviously this film marks her big screen debut. Fun fact number 3, Professor Xavier's sonic blast was achieved by shooting shaky cam footage, which was then stabilised in post-production, but they shot it a lot wider than was needed, so they can kind of edit the film and kind of try and hide the edges of the blurring, which I think was pretty cool. Obviously this is the fun fact number 4, this is the only film in the Wolverine series, I guess. Doesn't have a post-credit scene, I don't think. So it just kind of literally it rounds it off nicely in that kind of way.
What would be the post-credit screen? Where it's sort of maggots eating him.
Yeah, he dies.
It'll be like a Carrie sort of dream sequence or something.
Yeah.
It was
Just-
true.
just-
Yeah, just the claws come out of the ground.
Yeah, literally, he's not dead. You just see
Or he has his period in the shower.
adamantium spines come out. You think, oh my god.
That's probably the wrong bit.
or
to carry on to
or it'll be like the weapon. Oh, I forgot I've forgotten the name. You know, it's only been like what, an hour and I've forgotten the name.
Absolutely. X-23.
X-23 would be Samuel Jackson turn up and said like, you know, you're not the only mutant in the in the around
it's a
here.
superhero team up where they've all got different types of cutlery on their fingers. Like there's a
Yeah,
guy
somebody's
who's
got
just
spoons, somebody's got
spoons.
forks.
Yeah.
Somebody's
Oh,
got
okay.
one of those a spork and go, aha, I see you played Life is Screeny before.
Yeah.
Or Nork. And my last fun fact number 5
I'm
is
always
the
happy to see Norks in films.
Nork. No, you never see Norks, do you? You've never seen Norks.
I've seen.
I imagine
Norks
that'd be
in
quite
lots of
painful to eat
films.
with.
Well, I think
You'd have
we're
to shave. You'd have to like get the inside of your cheeks.
we're talking about two different things here, Becca.
I'm talking about Norks. I don't know what you're talking
I'm just
about.
thinking about that guy from what was it, Mystery Men?
Yeah.
He can like
Oh,
he can
yeah.
throw cutlery, but he can't throw knives. That's the only thing.
That's like the rubbish superhero.
I mean, fucks are alright, I guess. That's
They break into a top secret facility, but there's an egg like burning on the like in the kitchen there. So Spatula Man goes over and flips it.
Spatula Man, he's the best.
All right.
And then, fifth fun fact is the first superhero film to be nominated for a Best Adapted Screenplay Oscar and the first superhero movie to be nominated for screenwriting since 2004's The Incredibles, which I think is pretty cool. I think that's a fun fact.
When we get to the Pixar series, my hot take will be I think The Incredibles 2 is better than the first one.
Oh, no, it's alright.
I think it's just paced better, much better.
No, it's fine. I'm inclined to agree. But I do love The Incredibles.
Yeah.
They are incredible.
Okay. So, as for social media, you can find me at the Pasty Kid 1976 on Twitter.
you can find it at Central X. You can also find the podcast on Podbean now.
Yeah.
Sorry for the delays, but it will live as its new home. You can also find all the Central X Code UK as well as, but yes, it'll be everywhere, including Podbean. So not that really matters because you just Google it, but there you go.
Find it on Google Podcasts. Yes, you can find us on Twitter, Expect Us to Talk. You can find us on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Podbean, Stitcher, Podbay. Anywhere you may like to listen to us, you can find us. Should you wish, you can always email us, expecttalk@gmail.com, if you want to email us these days. But yeah, wherever platform you like to listen to us, don't forget to give us a rating, a nice review, to like us and share us amongst your friends on social media. Thank you.
Pass us around like the cheap tarts we are.
Yes.
Okay. Becca, what's coming next then?
Yes, Do You Expect to Talk will return with X-Men Dark Phoenix.